Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. To introduce my project, I'd like to start by telling you a story. In the early 1900s, a girl was born in a small village in rural China. When she was just 1 year old, her mother passed away. Her father remarried, but her stepmother rejected her, and she was left to face a childhood of abuse and neglect. She became reserved and distrusting of others and grew up to be a very hyper-independent, emotionally unavailable woman, and eventually a mother. A similar cycle of emotional neglect continued with her children too, and her children's children. It took on a new form when the middle child, the family's golden girl, immigrated to America for her career. Alone in this foreign country, she experienced new challenges, a huge culture shock, language barrier, racial discrimination, social isolation. The list goes on. From her perspective, America was a meritocracy, and the only way to protect herself and succeed here was to prove her value and herself through her skills. And of course, when she became a mother, she wanted to help her daughter succeed in America the way she knew best. But her overprotective behavior and high expectations were overwhelming. Her daughter began associating opening up to her parents with feelings of invalidation, belittlement, and misunderstanding. So just like those before her, she coped by building emotional walls and becoming hyper-independent. This is a story of intergenerational trauma. But don't worry, it has a happy ending because thankfully the daughter ended up at Princeton and is giving you this presentation now. I tell you my story in such detail to hopefully help you gain an inside understanding of how intergenerational trauma manifests in many Asian American families. You may have noticed that I've been repeating the term hyper-independent. I use this term intentionally because I think it's really relevant to the context of being Asian American today. People who are hyper-independent often avoid asking for help, even when they genuinely need it. And effects are especially prominent in the mental health sphere. Out of all racial groups, Asians are the least likely to seek mental health services. And to America, this reinforces the false narrative that Asian Americans don't require the same level of resources and support like other minority groups, which is encapsulated in the model minority myth. Hyperindependence perpetuates the model minority myth by reinforcing these stereotypes and expectations, adding onto the pressure for us to maintain this illusion of effortless success. And as you can imagine, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. My story is not unique. So many Asian Americans, especially second gen, have been speaking up about their experiences online, mainly through social media. And to get more of a personal perspective, I've been interviewing Asian American students and parents who are kind enough to share their own stories with me. Throughout these conversations, 4 things stood out to me. First is that there exists an inevitable gap in understanding between immigrant parents and their Americanized kids, which arises from differences in cultural values and generational experiences. This is worsened by a language barrier. A lot of students I talked to mentioned that they needed to use Google Translate to talk to their parents, especially through texting, which increases chances of misunderstanding and hinders deeper communication. This gap can create an emotional disconnection both between the parent and their kid, as well as within the kid themselves, making them feel alone and misunderstood. But this emotional disconnection is not inevitable. I noticed that students who grew up with more fractured family dynamics did not know much about their family's background story, and their conversations with their family, and in turn also their relationships with them, were stuck at the surface level. In contrast, the students I interviewed with the strongest family relationships had much greater understanding of their family origins because their parents often told stories about their past. I think this practice of storytelling combats the hyper-independence effect by opening up more space for vulnerability and offering opportunities for both parties to make each other feel heard and valued. I think this could really be key to bridging the understanding gap that I mentioned earlier and breaking the cycle. Another thing is that many undergraduate students I talked to noticed an improvement in their relationships with their parents after they left for college, in part because of the physical distance between them, but also because of the space for personal reflection that it naturally encouraged. This time period of college presents a window of opportunity for us to intervene in the cycle. Within the past 2 decades, the Asian American population in America has almost doubled, with 60% of US-born ones being a part of Gen Z and more than 90% of Asian undergraduate students being first or second gen. This means that the vast majority of Gen Z are living the dual identity of both being Asian American, which is being shaped by new American values and ideologies, while also maintaining a direct connection to our heritage and culture through our immigrant parents and grandparents. However, the effects of intergenerational trauma can make it difficult for us to have meaningful conversations with our family. We need to take advantage of the technology and resources we have now to understand and preserve stories from our heritage before we lose them with the generations that they came with. This is where GeneraZn Nexus steps in. GeneraZn represents a wordplay between Gen Z, Asian, and generation. The word nexus describes exactly how I envision Gen Z, the central link that connects the generations and breaks the intergenerational trauma cycle. I specify East Asian Americans here in our mission statement rather than Asian Americans as a whole for two reasons. One being that I understand the group the best as I am part of it. And two is that Asians are too broad and diverse of a group to be generalized when solving an issue like this. Throughout my presentation, you might have also noticed that I've mainly just been showing and talking about East Asian American women. I wanted to focus on this group, one, because again, I'm a part of it, and two, because of the unique challenges we face that push us to be more hyper-independent. For example, either being fetishized as exotic or expected to be innocent and docile. As more people join my team in the fall, we'll work on sparking meaningful intergenerational interactions by shifting the narrative to humanize immigrant parents and raising awareness of the existence of intergenerational trauma. The current narrative in American media is dominated by those growing up in the US, and it's really easy for us to just pin the blame on our immigrant parents for being too strict and demanding. Shifting the narrative away from villainizing immigrant parents to actually humanizing them would open up opportunities for us to bridge the gap that currently divides us. One of the students I interviewed actually told me about this question guard game, Parents Are Human, which has a similar goal as my project. I asked her and some other East Asian American students what they thought about it. And most of them said that they really love the concept, but they themselves would never be able to play it with their families because it feels too awkward to initiate such a vulnerable activity out of nowhere. I think this game would do a great job at targeting families that already feel comfortable being vulnerable with each other, but it overlooks families that are more fragmented and who actually require more help. And to be honest, I didn't even know my family story until I started working on this project this summer because we never talk about things like this. When I told my mom about this project, she completely just invalidated the mere idea of intergenerational trauma, saying that our family story is just like everyone else's. The fact that she doesn't even view it as a problem because of how normalized it is just shows how deep-rooted it is. When people talk about issues surrounding this topic online, I notice that pop culture generally favors the more humorous, attention-grabbing content over content that's longer and takes on more of a serious tone. I think the humorous content that's more popular is like obviously more engaging, but it also restricts the depth our conversations can go on such a complex topic. What's missing, or at least really sparse, is content that simultaneously engages and educates both Gen Z and Gen X. In order to break the cycle, we need to first bring it to the surface so that people impacted can see that the cycle even exists in the first place. My vision is that strengthening family relationships would create an environment where family members feel comfortable depending on each other for emotional support, helping to break the cycle. Over the course of the next school year, I want to create a solution that's both feasible and impactful in a way that can be easily incorporated into families' current dynamics and routines. So for example, a lot of the students I talk to mention how they always eat dinner with their families, even if they're eating in silence, and that is really meaningful to them. So incorporating some daily routine like that into our solution, I think would be really powerful. And if you would like to get involved with my project or have any suggestions, you can contact me at this email, which is just my name @princeton.edu.
Check out the full playlist from this year's 50 Days of Summer or visit kellercenter.princeton.edu/Tiger Challenge to learn more. Subscribe for more videos on entrepreneurship, design and design thinking, societal impact, and innovation coming out of Princeton University.